Just one follow-up question to Mark, and then we'll move to the audience. Mark, Abdullah mentioned something about regulatory environment and having a friendly trade environment. To what extent do you think protectionism of markets by countries would affect the possibility of regional cooperation in infrastructure development?
No, I think he's exactly correct that those kinds of policies really break down trust and potential for successful negotiations as well. It's not, interregional trade also, of course, is unaffected by the kinds of factors that Maximo said in terms of not only poor roads, but checkpoints all over the place, illegal charges to farmers. So that nexus of things around protectionism and trade barriers is what I think one of the most important things holding back interregional trade here in Africa.
I'd like to, let's have some questions from the audience. I will take one question from each one of the sections in the room. Everybody has been mostly starting from this end, so I will start in this corner. Questions? Ethiopia?
Thank you. My comment is to the panel. We have been talking about infrastructure, mainly on road, telecom, and others, but I think as this is a ReSAKSS conference, it will be important to mention also the data and information infrastructure, because mainly the agriculture sector and other economic sectors are being affected in the absence of evidence generation. So having an infrastructure in place, telecom could do some part of it in terms of connectivity, but it goes beyond that as it needs appropriate information systems so that data transaction can happen quickly. So this should be taken into consideration. And whenever we talk about infrastructure again, in addition to its contribution for economic transformation, it is doing good to Africa in terms of employment opportunity. When those constructions are happening, it is creating a job opportunity for the youth and also women who are providing food and other services to the people who are engaged in construction. Thank you.
I think that was more a comment. Any other questions? Over here.
Okay, let me use this one. Thank you. My name is Tula Sizo. I'm from Swaziland and I'm a consultant. Now, I just wanted to ask, I don't know between David and John who is more appropriate to respond to this, but they are old enough to decide. But I just wanted to ask, in your opinion, what makes governments to consider input from non-state actors? Particularly when it comes to setting of priorities. In this case, we are talking about infrastructure priorities. What makes governments to actually take your input? And for me, that is important because if we can get around that, that means non-state actors will have sort of more propensity towards actually making the impact that is desired in terms of influencing that space. Also, I'm looking at the issue of economic logic versus political pressure in terms of setting priorities. I don't know which one is weighing more this time around, because if it is political pressure, then the space for influence is actually shrinking. So I just wanted to find out, in terms of your opinion and experience, what is it that matters when it comes to non-state actors influencing government? Thank you.
One more question.
Okay, thank you. My name is Godswill because you'll agree from Nigeria. I was wondering because this conference has been able to isolate a lot of problems in the agricultural sector, and then I'm thinking if it is possible for us to prioritize, because why I'm saying this is because I've been part of so many or a few developmental projects that are focused on the agricultural sector, and I see some of them, by my own definition, being misdirected. You know, I have been part of some programs that are just basically focusing on training of farmers, while in the area where you are training the farmers, there are other major problems that are critical to the agricultural sector. Can we say, or can we categorically say that infrastructural development is the major problem of the agriculture sector, and then we begin to recommend that developmental assistance, government priorities should be more, because if we have infrastructural deficit that is critical and we are focusing on training farmers, educating farmers, science and tech, I mean, what should rather be the priority of development and growth, especially in the agricultural sector? Thank you.
Okay, I think we will answer the questions that are there. I've been told it's time up. I think if you can, I don't know, John or which one of you is going to take that question?
Yeah, let me take the first one. The input from non-state actors, it depends on what type of road you are building. If it's a political road, I don't think you'll have much, I mean, non-state actors will have much to say. But if it's an economic type of infrastructure, like the development that I mentioned, there is a need for a port to service a market platform. For that one, I mean, the government didn't have to market. The private sector by itself came in to be part of the program because it's profitable for the private sector. But there are also other type of infrastructure, social infrastructure, for example. That's where you have the government and development partners like the World Bank, ADB, and so forth. So it will all depends on the type of infrastructure. And of course, the costs. If the government has the money to do it, I think usually they will go and do it for, you know, most of the time they try to protect the how I'll put it, the country's pride, you know, especially when it's a political project.
The issue of infrastructure, whether the infrastructure is the major problem, but okay, you want to add?
Yes, to just to the question raised. Whether what makes government to consider NSA inputs in infrastructure, John has put a point in terms of whether the road is political. I look at it differently in the sense that there are two things that influences whether a government listens to a civil society organization or not. One is that at the point where elections matter, where results is what will re-elect you, government is bound to listen to civil society. So that's the political angle of why government will want to listen to civil society, because they realize that at some point, because these guys can mobilize citizens against government programs. So they want to listen from that perspective. The second aspect is that of knowledge base. When I started working on budgets and budget processes about 10 years ago, the government just was not ready to listen to us, because there is this misconception, or at that time there was this misconception that many of the people who got involved in NGO work were people who did not get job, who did not pass well to go into government and other things. So it meant that you needed to convince, you needed to show that yes, your analysis, why you are saying this mix is not the best, is based on the analysis you have done, the knowledge, what you've provided on the table. And so government will listen to you when they have those two scenarios in place. But if those two scenarios are not in place, if you shout from today till tomorrow, government will not listen. They go on with whatever program or project they intend to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But I wanted you to, as the last question, to look at infrastructure. Is it the biggest problem? What is the situation there?
Yeah, I think in the case of Ethiopia, we have done a decomposition analysis and tried to understand what has been driving this agricultural growth in the country. And so there are different factors. There are roads, there are extension agents, there is better education, etc. Now, I want to maybe stress the point that Maximo was making. So there are big complementarities between these things, right? So you can, if you don't have a road, it's very hard to get your extension agents out there. Okay, so, you know, this is like a condition that you need to have before you can do anything on extension. But if the extension is not coming and you only have your road, it doesn't help a lot either. The same with education. So if you have a road, if people have access to roads, they're more likely to go to school, etc. So it's very hard to say, is this really the only constraint? Obviously it's not. All the other institutions have to work as well, but it is a major one in most cases, I would say.
I think we've run out of time. I think the time is not on our side, sorry, panelists. But I'm sure the conversations can continue at dinner and also tomorrow in some of the group discussions. You can bring up some of the issues as well. I think to sum up, I think it's just to say that infrastructure may not be the only problem, but it's definitely a significant one that needs to be dealt with, and that a number of issues need to be taken into account in the mix, in the decisions that are made. With that, I would like to say thank you very much for your patience in hanging around until this hour, and please do have a wonderful dinner. Thank you. Thank you, panelists.